Verse 2. At this the high priest Ananias ordered those standing near Paul to strike him on the mouth. Ananias, the high priest, had a reputation for being a hothead, and here he proves it by having Paul slapped for no good reason at all. And we have seen nothing but unfair treatment, false accusation against Paul and the other apostles. There are some real negative things in this Bible, Old Testament, New Testament, horrible things that God's people must endure. It is a biblical fact, and it's important for us to see these things. Christianity isn't about positive confession, feel-good pep talks, and false promises of prosperity. That is a lie. You have to throw away much of the Bible to come up with those things as doctrine. Well, it'll get you 30,000 people in your church, that's for sure. But it is a horrible disservice to Jesus Christ. And you can certainly build a religious empire, make a lot of money, with one feel-good positive confession sermon after another. Story time sermons. But every bit of it is going to go up in smoke on the day of judgment. It's not real. The Bible says in latter days, people will be looking for preachers and teachers who will tell them what they want to hear. We are in those days. Verse 3. Then Paul said to him, God will strike you, you whitewashed wall. You sit there to judge me according to the law, yet you self violate the law by commanding that I be struck. Those who were standing near Paul said, You dare to insult God's high priest? Paul replied, Brothers, I did not realize that he was the high priest, for it is written, Do not speak evil about the ruler of your people. Now, we don't have to agree with our rulers. We don't even have to like them. But if we do not honor them, we sin. Even a warped individual like Ananias needed to be treated with respect. Verse 6, then Paul, knowing that some of them were Sadducees and others Pharisees, called out in the Sanhedrin, My brothers, I am a Pharisee, the son of a Pharisee. I stand on trial because of my hope in the resurrection of the dead. Now, this Jewish court was divided between the theological liberals, who believed in nothing supernatural, the Sadducees, and the theological conservatives, who believed in the resurrection and other supernatural things, the Pharisees. It was divided. And by bringing up the resurrection, Paul's divided this court. Verse 7, and he does. When he said this, a dispute broke out between the Pharisees and the Sadducees, and the assembly was divided. The Sadducees say that there is no resurrection, and that there are neither angels nor spirits, but the Pharisees acknowledge them all. The Pharisees had their problems for sure, but at least they believed the Word of God. At least they didn't explain away the Word of God like the Sadducees did. And Satan has always had his human puppets working in the realm of religion, teaching that the Word of God doesn't mean what it says. He has them pay, Protestant and Catholic alike. And if he can just get people to doubt the Word of God, he's got it made, because then he has cut the umbilical cord to God. There's no longer any authority. So from there, it's easy for Satan to get people to go with their feelings or whatever. Undermine the authority of the Word of God. Verse 9. There was a great uproar, And some of the teachers of the law who were Pharisees stood up and argued vigorously. "We find nothing wrong with this man," they said. "What if a spirit or an angel has spoken to him?" The Pharisees say, "This Paul is a good guy. Quit picking on him." So they disliked their theological opponents in that room more than they disliked the Christian Paul. And we see from this that what you already know, truth causes division between those who accept it and those who do not. Verse 10. The dispute became so violent that the commander was afraid Paul would be torn to pieces by them. And he ordered the troops to go down and take him away from them by force and bring him into the barracks. Well, that hearing did not accomplish anything worthwhile, especially for that poor Roman commander who still doesn't know what Paul's crime is. Verse 11. Following night, the Lord stood near Paul and said, "Take courage. As you have testified about me in Jerusalem, so you must also testify in Rome." And I think Paul really needed that encouraging word from Christ. So many people wanted to kill him because of his faith. It must have been nice to hear that he would not die in Jerusalem, but he would eventually make it to Rome to preach Jesus there. Of course, Jesus did not tell Paul how he would make it to Rome. And as we will see, probably beginning next week, it's not going to be a very pleasant trip. Verse 12, in the morning the Jews formed a conspiracy and bound themselves with an oath not to eat or drink until they had killed Paul. The Jews will commit the sin of murder if that is the only way to stop the ministry of Christ through the Apostle Paul. They will kill. Their religion was so precious to them that they were willing to break God's commandments on its behalf. And so their religion had become an idol, more important even than God. Verse 13. More than 40 men were involved in this plot. So they had an ambush plan. 40 Jews. And of course, the problem with a conspiracy that large, not just that it is sinful, but that somebody is going to mess up and make a mistake and give the whole thing away. Bound to happen. 14. They went to the chief priest and elders and said, "We have taken a solemn oath not to eat anything until we have killed Paul." So they tell their evil plans to their chief priests. They should be confessing their sinful plans to him. But they're not. Instead, they're looking for cooperation. 15. Now then, you and the Sanhedrin petition the commander to bring him before you on the pretext of wanting more accurate information about his case. We are ready to kill him before he gets here. Tell the commander that we want another hearing with Paul. And while they are on the way to this supposed hearing, we will ambush Paul and we will kill him. Now, see, they could not stop Paul legally, so they will try to murder him. When hateful people want to hurt a good person, they're not going to quit after one failed attempt. They'll just regroup, try again and again, because that's the way hatred works. Verse 16. But when the son of Paul's sister heard of this plot, he went into the barracks and told Paul. Someone got careless. And Paul's nephew, through the providence of God, learns of his ambush and warns his uncle. Workers of evil try very hard to keep their plans hidden, but God has many methods of exposing those plans and of exposing their wickedness. In somehow, some way, usually it comes out. 17. Then Paul called one of the centurions and said, "Take this young man to the commander. He has something to tell him." Paul asked a Roman officer, probably one who was guarding him, to take his nephew to see the commander so that he can warn him of this ambush. Verse 18. So he took him to the commander. The centurion said, Paul, the prisoner, sent for me and asked me to bring this young man to you because he has something to tell you. Did you notice that Paul has a new title? He is now Paul the prisoner. And this centurion, this guard, who did not have to respond to the request of a prisoner, did not have to do a favor for a prisoner, kindly brings his nephew to the commander anyway. That's very biblical, because Jesus instructs us to be kind to prisoners. And somebody might say, well, they don't deserve kindness. Yeah, but so what? We've all done bad things to God. We are all lawbreakers. None of us deserve kindness. We all deserve worse than prison from God because of our sin. 19. The commander took the young man by the hand, drew him aside, and asked, What is it that you want to tell me? He said, The Jews have agreed to ask you to bring Paul before the Sanhedrin tomorrow on the pretext of wanting more accurate information about him. Don't give in to them, because more than 40 of them are waiting in ambush for him. They have taken an oath not to eat or drink until they have killed him. They are ready now, waiting for your consent to their request. The commander dismissed the young man and cautioned him, Don't tell anyone that you have reported this to me. So, as we can see, the plot failed. So I wonder if those Jews ever broke their oath and ate anything, or if they died of starvation like they swore they would do. And notice how we don't know that, but we can notice this. Notice how the Lord is keeping his promise to get Paul to Rome. He used his nephew. He used the commander. He used the centurion. God uses people and circumstances most of the time to bring his will and his promises to pass. God's ability to do that is a bigger miracle than a regular miracle. Verse 23. Then he called 2 of his centurions and ordered them, Get ready a detachment of 200 soldiers, 70 horsemen, 200 spearmen to go into Caesarea at 9 tonight. Provide mounts for Paul so that he may be taken safely to Governor Felix. Each one of Paul's visits to Jerusalem as a Christian turned out to be a nightmare. Jesus told Paul, the Jews in Jerusalem will not listen to you, and they sure did not. This is the 3rd time he had to sneak out of that city after dark. Well, the story continues in verse 25 next time. Until then, so long, everyone.